Do you know how long it takes for someone to truly be noticed? Ethan's small feet shuffled lightly on the marble walkway, his eyes fixed on the massive gates of Han Junsu's estate. The sun dipping low over the city, casting long golden shadows across the perfectly manicured hedges. For 3 hours he had stood there without a single word, his hands tucked neatly at his sides, posture rigid, as if every inch of him was holding back a story too heavy for the afternoon air. The gates loomed like a barrier not just of iron, but of power, wealth, and unspoken rules that governed the world beyond them. Across the driveway, the mansion glistened, windows reflecting the last rays of sunlight like mirrors of glass and marble. Every detail a testament to the Korean Mafia boss's meticulous control. Ethan's breath came slow, deliberate, and measured. He had learned early that patience spoke louder than any shout, that silence could carry messages deeper than words ever could. From the shadows of the olive trees lining the driveway, Ma watched him carefully, her dark skin glowing softly in the waning sunlight, her heart caught between admiration and concern. She had guided him here, reminded him gently of the stakes, and yet she understood that this moment, this act of quiet defiance and persistence, was his alone. Every now and then, a breeze would lift the hem of Ethan's jacket and tousle his hair, and she would feel the weight of his determination as if it pressed into her own chest. She knew the rules of this mansion, the unspoken boundaries, and the kind of man Han Jun-soo was. His reputation as a cold, calculating, and exacting figure stretched across districts and whispered in the alleys of Seoul. And yet here, at this gate, Ethan dared to meet that world on his own terms. A small figure against the grandeur, yet unyielding. The air was thick with tension, almost tangible, carrying the scent of the polished stone, freshly trimmed grass, and faint hints of jasmine from the gardens beyond. Passers-by had slowed to glance, some with curiosity, others with mild concern, but Ethan remained unmoved, as if the hours of waiting had trained him to merge with the space around him, his stillness commanding attention without a sound. Maya's fingers fidgeted with the strap of her bag, a reflex born of anxiety. Yet, her eyes never left him, noting the slight shifts, the barely perceptible adjustments as he shifted his weight from one foot to another. Every second that ticked by seemed to echo in the stillness, magnifying the presence of both the boy and the mansion that loomed behind him. And then, a shadow detached itself from the threshold. Han Jun-soo, his posture precise, suit immaculate, and eyes scanning the figure at his gates with the kind of intensity that made the very air around him seem to pulse. He stopped a few paces from Ethan, expression unreadable, but his gaze sharp, measuring, considering. The boy did not flinch. He did not speak. For a heartbeat, it seemed as though the entire city held its breath along with the two figures, the wind settling into an expectant hush. Ma exhaled quietly, her chest tight, as she observed the unspoken dialogue between the Korean Mafia boss and the small boy whose courage and calm had carved a space for him in a world ruled by power. Each footstep of Jun-soo toward the gate was deliberate, the click of his polished shoes against the stone a metronome counting down the tension, and yet Ethan did not move, did not break, holding a quiet confidence that spoke of resilience beyond his years. The sun continued its descent, painting the scene with amber light, and the shadows of the wrought iron gates stretched long across the driveway, framing Ethan and Han Jun-soo in a tableau of anticipation. A silent conversation carried entirely on presence and the weight of unspoken respect, as if the boy's steadfast patience alone could shift the balance of the man behind those gates. Ma crouched slightly behind a neatly trimmed hedge, her eyes never leaving Ethan as he continued to stand at the gate, silent and unwavering, the shadows of the late afternoon stretching across the driveway and wrapping the boy in a warm, amber glow. She had guided him here with quiet words, explaining the etiquette of patience and the gravity of respect in this neighborhood. But she knew that now he had taken ownership of the moment entirely, and it was his resolve that commanded the attention of the mansion beyond. Han Jun-soo had stepped back a pace, adjusting the cuff of his suit, his dark eyes narrowing ever so slightly as he assessed the boy in front of him, measuring. Courage, intention, and perhaps a hint of mischief that came from innocence. The gate between them was no longer simply a physical barrier. It had become a stage where silence itself spoke volumes. Ethan's fingers tightened slightly, not out of fear, but as if to remind himself of the commitment to stay, to wait, and to show that respect could be quiet and steadfast. Maya's own chest rose and fell slowly, her presence a gentle anchor, and she could feel the tension of time stretching, each second heavy with expectation. She thought of the lessons she had imparted to him over the past few months, stories of patience, empathy, and the idea that sometimes the smallest acts could echo farther than any words ever might, and she saw that those lessons had taken root in a way only a child's sincerity could make real. From inside the mansion, the glint of polished floors and the soft shimmer of chandeliers reflected the fading light, a visual reminder of the disparity between the boy's world and the domain of Han Jun-soo. Yet Ethan did not falter. He was a quiet testament to courage that needed no proclamation. The Korean Mafia boss, tall and impeccably groomed, stepped closer to the threshold, his gaze still fixed on Ethan, and for a moment, the sunlight glimmered off the edges of his watch and cufflinks, catching the attention of both the boy and Mai, and creating a subtle visual link between the domains of power and humility. Mai's lips parted slightly as she took a shallow breath, recognizing the unspoken communication unfolding in the space between them. It was a dialogue of stillness, of observation, and of trust that did not require sound. Ethan's small feet shifted just enough to align himself with the shadow of the gate, a subtle movement that spoke to awareness without breaking the silence. And Han Jun-soo's eyes softened imperceptibly, a hint of curiosity now threading through the usual composure and control. The air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and warm stone, mingling with the distant fragrance of jasmine from the gardens, and I felt the pulse of patience in the boy resonate with the measured cadence of the mansion itself, as if the estate had paused to acknowledge the quiet determination of a single child standing steadfast in the face of a world much larger than he was. Time stretched further, the final rays of sunlight casting a soft glow over Ethan's resolute expression, and Maya allowed herself a small, internal smile, knowing that this encounter was no longer about instruction, but about the natural unfolding of character, and that Han Jun-soo, watching silently, was already beginning to reckon with the subtle power contained within this display of courage and composure. Maya stepped closer to Ethan, her hand hovering just above his shoulder as if to offer reassurance without breaking the fragile bubble of calm that surrounded him. The air was now tinged with the soft scent of evening roses from the garden beds lining the driveway, mingling with the faint aroma of polished stone from the mansion, creating a sensory backdrop that contrasted sharply with the tense quiet of the moment. Han Jun-soo adjusted the lapel of his suit, his gaze fixed on the boy with an intensity that carried both authority and curiosity. Each step he took measured and deliberate on the cobblestone path leading to the gate. The golden light of the setting sun glinted off the wrought iron, casting long, angular shadows that stretched across Ethan's small frame, emphasizing the contrast between the immensity of the estate and the quiet determination of the child. Ethan's eyes, deep and steady, met Jun-soo's for the first time, a connection forming without words, a silent communication that required no explanation, no introduction, only presence and understanding. Mai noticed the subtle shift in the boss's stance, the slight relaxation of his shoulders, the brief softening of his sharp features, and she allowed herself a breath, sensing that the balance had begun to tip, that the stillness and patience displayed by Ethan was starting to penetrate the hardened exterior of the man behind the gates. The light wind teased the edges of Ethan's jacket, lifting it slightly and revealing the worn but clean shoes on his feet, a reminder of the boy's humility and the everyday challenges he had faced, challenges that seemed to carry more weight in this moment than the wealth and power surrounding him. Han Jun-soo's shadow stretched toward Ethan as he finally took a step closer, his polished shoes clicking softly against the cobblestone. And yet Ethan remained steadfast, not flinching, not speaking, simply existing in the space between expectation and patience. I could feel her heart rate quicken, not out of fear but in awe of the composure Ethan maintained, and she sensed that the boss, too, was beginning to reckon with the gravity of the boy's presence, the deliberate calm that spoke louder than any plea or explanation could. From the edge of the driveway, the hedges framed the scene like a natural stage, sunlight filtering through the leaves and highlighting the golden strands of Ethan's hair, giving him an almost ethereal glow against the backdrop of concrete, marble, and iron that defined the estate. The mansion itself seemed to pause, the faint clinking of distant fountains, the soft rustle of the garden leaves, and the whisper of the wind around the gate forming a symphony of subtle sound that accentuated the stillness between the three figures. Han Jun-soo exhaled slowly, a gesture barely noticeable, yet it carried the weight of his contemplation, and he extended a hand slightly. Not an invitation, but an acknowledgement, a quiet recognition of the courage and presence Ethan had demonstrated. Maya's eyes glistened with unspoken pride, knowing that this moment, forged in patience and silent resolve, was the hinge on which the evening would turn, a delicate balance between authority and innocence, power and humility, all suspended in the amber glow of the fading sun as Ethan continued to stand firm, silent yet profoundly expressive in the language of quiet determination. The sky had turned a deeper shade of orange, streaked with hints of violet as evening settled over the sprawling estate, and the first stars began to emerge faintly above the treetops, reflecting in the polished marble of the courtyard. Ethan remained at the gate, his small frame silhouetted against the fading light, unwavering in posture, a quiet testament to patience and quiet courage that seemed to hold the very air still around him. I stepped slightly closer, her hand brushing lightly against the wrought iron as she spoke softly, her voice low enough not to break the silence yet imbued with warmth. "You do not have to wait alone, you know," she whispered, but Ethan did not respond, only shifted his weight slightly, eyes focused, hands still folded neatly in front of him, radiating a calm resolve that belied the hours he had already endured. Inside the mansion, Han Jun-soo adjusted the cuff of his jacket, the movement precise and deliberate, and his eyes narrowed as he studied the boy with careful attention, each subtle, expression measured, as though he were calculating not just the child's intent, but the weight of the silent message he was delivering through mere presence. The gates, tall and black, gleamed faintly in the soft twilight, casting angular shadows that stretched across the driveway, highlighting the contrast between the small, steady figure of Ethan and the imposing grandeur of the estate behind him. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of evening jasmine and polished stone, blending with the residual warmth of the day, and I could feel the stillness around them deepen, a quiet tension that was neither hostile nor welcoming, but full of expectation. Ethan's eyes flickered briefly toward a small nod, acknowledging her support, yet he remained entirely composed, an embodiment of silent determination, as if every second of waiting was a deliberate act of communication that words could never match. Han Jun-soo took another measured step, his polished shoes clicking softly against the stone, and for the first time, there was a subtle shift in his expression, a softening that was nearly imperceptible, the result of witnessing such unwavering focus and silent courage in one so small and seemingly fragile. From her position, Mai felt a surge of admiration for the boy, recognizing the depth of understanding and control required to maintain such composure, and she sensed that the boss, too, was beginning to feel the impact of Ethan's quiet determination, a realization that presence and intent could speak louder than power or wealth. The mansion's reflective windows caught the fading sunlight, casting golden highlights across the meticulously manicured grounds, while the long shadows of the gate stretched toward Ethan, creating a visual frame that emphasized the quiet gravity of the moment. Han Jun-soo paused, weighing his next move carefully, eyes locked on the child who had chosen patience and resolve over reaction. And in that pause, The air seemed to hum with anticipation, the estate itself holding its breath as if acknowledging the significance of this silent interaction. Ethan shifted just slightly, a micro-movement that conveyed awareness without disturbance, and Han Jun-soo's expression softened further, a glimmer of intrigue and respect flickering behind the measured composure of his gaze. Maya's chest rose and fell slowly, her presence a grounding influence, as she observed the subtle exchange unfolding, realizing that the unspoken bond forming in that moment between the Korean Mafia boss and the young boy was the kind of connection that would leave a lasting impression, an imprint of quiet dignity and courage that transcended the boundaries of age, power, and circumstance. The sky darkened gradually, the colors melting into a soft twilight, and Ethan continued to stand, silent yet profoundly expressive, as the boss lingered at the gate, contemplating the weight of patience, respect, and the quiet power of a small, determined heart. Mai took a careful step closer to the gate, her eyes soft yet alert, keeping watch over Ethan as the boy remained poised and silent, the dimming evening casting a soft golden light across his determined expression. The mansion behind them glimmered in the fading sunlight, the windows reflecting the warm hues of the sky, while the marble driveway stretched out like a polished stage, emphasizing the vast difference between the small boy and the grandeur of Han Jun-soo's domain. Ethan's posture did not waver. He stood straight, hands clasped gently in front of him, every inch of him radiating quiet confidence and unwavering patience, as if he understood the weight of the moment and the unspoken expectations of the man who watched from the gate. Maya's breath was steady, though her heart beat faster with each passing second, as she observed how Ethan's stillness seemed to carry a message of respect and courage that transcended words, and she felt a quiet pride in the boy who had absorbed the lesson she had shared about patience, empathy, and the subtle power of presence. Han Jun-soo's eyes, dark and assessing, traced every movement of Ethan with precision, noting the slight shifts in weight, the careful tilt of the head, and the faintest glimmer of determination that shone in the boy's gaze. The air carried the faint scent of evening jasmine mingled with the polished stone of the driveway, creating a delicate sensory backdrop that enhanced the gravity of the silent encounter. Each step Jun-soo took was deliberate, measured, and unobtrusive, yet it seemed to draw the attention of the boy in a way that made the space between them electric with anticipation, the quiet hum of the surrounding estate amplifying the importance of this unspoken exchange. Ethan's eyes flickered toward Mai briefly, a subtle acknowledgement of her presence and guidance. Yet he did not break his concentration, remaining entirely composed, embodying the lessons of resilience, dignity, and quiet courage she had instilled in him. The gates, tall and wrought iron, cast elongated shadows across the courtyard, framing Ethan as a solitary figure standing against the backdrop of opulence and authority. And for a moment, it seemed as though the estate itself paused to witness the unfolding moment, the garden leaves rustling gently, as if in quiet applause for the child's steadfastness. Han Jun-soo exhaled slowly, the subtle movement barely noticeable, yet imbued with contemplation, and he extended a hand slightly toward the boy, not as a command or an invitation, but as a gesture of recognition, an acknowledgement of the courage and composure Ethan displayed. Maya's eyes glistened faintly in the soft light as she felt the shift in energy, sensing that this quiet act of presence had begun to touch the hardened heart of the Korean Mafia boss, a realization that the small, deliberate patience of a single child could resonate far beyond what anyone had expected. The driveway seemed to stretch longer, the shadows growing deeper, and the mansion's reflective windows caught the last rays of sunlight, highlighting the edges of Jun-soo's sharp features and the silhouette of Ethan, solid and unwavering, a visual testament to the power of quiet courage and the profound impact of simple, patient presence. Every second that passed deepened the weight of the moment, and Mai felt a quiet sense of wonder as she watched Han Jun-soo, begin to reckon with the gravity of the boy's resolve, an understanding that sometimes the smallest acts held the greatest influence over even the most formidable of figures. Han Jun-soo finally stopped a few feet from the gate, the polished stones of the driveway gleaming under the soft twilight, and his eyes lingered on Ethan with an intensity that carried both caution and fascination. The Korean Mafia boss's posture was still impeccable, yet the slight tilt of his head and the subtle loosening of his jawline hinted at the curiosity that had begun to stir within him, a rare and fragile acknowledgment of the boy who had dared to stand unwavering for hours. Mai remained beside Ethan, her presence calm and grounding, her dark eyes reflecting the fading light as she watched the silent interaction unfold, understanding that the balance of authority and innocence had shifted subtly in these past moments. Ethan's gaze did not waver, meeting Jun-soo's eyes with a quiet confidence that conveyed awareness, respect, and the unspoken message that he had arrived prepared to wait, to endure, and to communicate without a single word. The gates, tall and intricate, cast long shadows across the courtyard, framing the trio in a tableau of expectation and contemplation, the geometry of iron and marble emphasizing the weight of the moment, and the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze punctuated the stillness with gentle sound, carrying the scent of jasmine and trimmed hedges. Han Jun-soo exhaled slowly, a deliberate movement that seemed to measure the time that had passed, the patience that had been required, and the significance of the boy's steadfast composure. He shifted slightly, the subtle click of his shoes on the cobblestone, a metronome marking the slow build of understanding and respect forming in the quiet distance between them. Ethan, for his part, remained fully composed, the faintest flicker of awareness in his eyes acknowledging that the boss had taken notice, yet without any change to the steadfast stillness he had maintained since first arriving at the gate. Mai's hand brushed lightly over her bag strap, an unconscious gesture of support, as she observed the subtle communication that had emerged without sound, the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes presence alone carried more meaning than words ever could. The mansion behind Han Jun-soo gleamed softly as interior lights began to glow, reflecting against the polished marble and glass, signaling the transition from day to evening and casting a warm hue across the courtyard, highlighting Ethan's small figure in the foreground. The boy's patience and quiet resolve now becoming almost palpable in the space between the immense structure and the open sky above. Han Jun-soo's eyes softened imperceptibly, a shift so subtle it might have been missed by anyone else. Yet it spoke volumes about the beginning of connection, of recognition, and of the contemplation of lessons that even a man of his experience could not ignore. The wind stirred lightly, moving through the hedges and the gates, carrying with it the faint, sweet fragrance of flowers, and in that movement, the stillness between the boy, the woman, and the boss seemed to vibrate with unspoken possibilities, a delicate tension filled with respect, wonder, and the promise that patience, courage, and quiet resolve could leave a lasting impression on even the most powerful figure in the world. Every breath, every heartbeat, every soft step on the cobblestone added to the weight of the moment, and I felt the depth of the unspoken bond forming, sensing that the boss was beginning to understand the profound impact of the boy's simple, unwavering act, an act that would resonate far beyond this evening, leaving an imprint of humility, patience, and silent strength upon a man accustomed to control, power, and precision. I shifted slightly, a subtle movement meant only to offer Ethan reassurance without drawing attention, as the boy bent slowly and carefully to place a small, folded note on the polished marble walkway just beyond the gate, his fingers trembling ever so slightly as he released it. The note was simple, neatly written on plain paper, yet its meaning carried a weight far beyond its size, and the careful placement spoke volumes of thoughtfulness, courage, and quiet understanding. Han Jun-soo leaned forward slightly from his position near the gate, his dark eyes narrowing as they followed the precise motion of Ethan's hands, every small gesture magnified by the contrast between the boy's stature and the grand estate behind him. The setting sun reflected off the black wrought iron and marble columns, bathing the scene in a soft golden light that seemed to soften the sharp edges of authority and power surrounding the boss, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere where patience and presence held more sway than words or commands. Ethan rose slowly, his posture straight and unwavering, and without a word, he stepped back a few paces, his eyes still fixed on Han Jun-soo, as if daring the man to acknowledge what had just been offered. Maya's breath was steady, though her chest tightened with anticipation, knowing that the impact of this simple act would ripple through the silence, breaking down walls that wealth and authority alone had built over decades. The mansion behind them glistened in the soft evening light, windows catching the last rays of sunlight, and the polished stones of the courtyard seemed to amplify the significance of the note, the small gesture contrasting sharply with the grandeur of the estate and the presence of the man who had remained so impassive until now. Han Jun-soo's gaze shifted slowly to the folded paper, a subtle frown creasing his forehead as curiosity and a flicker of unexpected warmth began to take hold, his mind racing through possibilities, meanings, and the sincerity of the child who had dared to act with such deliberate calm and thoughtfulness. The quiet rustle of the wind through the hedges and trees added a soft soundtrack to the moment, carrying the scent of evening jasmine and polished stone, and every breath seemed to stretch in time as the boss considered the weight of the act, the patience required, and the courage it took to perform such a gesture without demand, without expectation, simply as an expression of character and respect. Maya's eyes glistened faintly as she observed Han Jun-soo, noting the subtle change in posture, the imperceptible softening around his eyes, and the slight parting of his lips, all of which suggested that the small, thoughtful act had begun to pierce the barrier of authority and detachment that so rarely yielded to anything outside of control or command. Ethan remained poised, hands folded again in front of him, a quiet sentinel standing in the growing dusk, his presence and composure holding a mirror to the man who watched him, reflecting patience, sincerity, and the quiet strength that could influence even those accustomed to command. The gates, tall and black, cast elongated shadows across the driveway, framing the scene in a visual narrative that spoke to the contrast between power and humility, and the fading sunlight highlighted both the smallness of the boy and the imposing figure of the boss, creating a tension and anticipation that seemed to hold the entire courtyard in suspended attention. Every element, the subtle movement of the boy, the careful placement of the note, the shifting light, the soft breeze, and the mansion itself, worked together to amplify the unspoken communication, and I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, recognizing that the impact of such a deliberate, silent gesture had begun to take hold within Han Jun-soo, planting the seed of understanding, respect, and a quietly profound connection between two very different worlds. Han Jun-soo's dark eyes lingered on the small, folded note that Ethan had left at the gate, and for the first time in hours, a shadow of genuine curiosity flickered across his face. The Korean Mafia boss leaned slightly forward, his hand resting on the wrought iron as if to steady himself, the polished marble of the driveway reflecting the warm glow of the twilight behind him. Every detail of the estate, the manicured gardens, the tall windows catching the last rays of the sun, and the soft shimmer of lanterns beginning to glow along the pathway, seemed to frame this silent exchange, amplifying the significance of the boy's simple, deliberate action. My watch from just behind Ethan, her posture calm but alert, sensing the shift in the energy around the gate, the quiet ripple that Ethan's patience and resolve had created. Ethan remained upright, composed, his small frame almost luminous in the evening light, conveying determination and thoughtfulness without a single word. The wind stirred lightly, carrying the scent of jasmine and polished stone, and Han Jun-soo inhaled slowly, his expression thoughtful, as if measuring the impact of what he had just witnessed, understanding that this was no ordinary gesture, no fleeting whim of a child, but a deliberate act that spoke to courage, patience, and awareness beyond his years. The note rested softly on the stone walkway, simple yet potent, a quiet challenge, and a silent bridge between the boy and the man whose domain sprawled behind the gate. Junsu's posture softened imperceptibly, the rigid authority he usually held giving way to contemplation, a recognition that even in a world governed by power and control, subtlety and quiet courage could command attention and respect. Mai felt the weight of the moment, the electricity in the still air, and she allowed herself a small, private smile, knowing that the boy's action had begun to influence the man before them, a gentle yet undeniable impression that might linger long after the evening shadows deepened. The gates cast long, angular shadows across the driveway, the ironwork creating a visual rhythm that mirrored the tension and anticipation of the moment, while the mansion's reflective windows caught the amber light, highlighting the contrast between the expansive world of wealth and authority and the small, steadfast figure standing in front of it. Han Jun-soo shifted his gaze from the note to Ethan's eyes, and the subtle softening of his features spoke of an unspoken acknowledgement, a recognition of the boy's courage, integrity, and patience. The surrounding gardens rustled lightly in the evening breeze, leaves brushing softly against one another, echoing the quiet heartbeat of the moment, and the fading light traced along the edges of the boss and the boy, capturing the suspended significance of the encounter. Maya's heart swelled with quiet pride as she watched the interaction, understanding that the impact of this single, patient gesture was beginning to resonate, planting a seed of understanding, empathy, and respect in the heart of a man who had long been accustomed to command and authority, yet now found himself quietly affected by the presence, resolve, and courage of a single child. The sun had fully dipped below the horizon, leaving the courtyard bathed in the soft glow of lanterns and the first twinkling stars overhead, casting delicate reflections across the polished marble of the driveway. Ethan remained in place, small yet resolute, the folded note still lying on the ground like a symbol of quiet determination, and Maya's presence beside him was a steady, reassuring warmth that seemed to anchor both of them in the moment. Han Jun-soo stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the stones, and for a long beat, he simply observed the boy, eyes tracking every small gesture, every subtle breath, the faint rise and fall of his chest, the careful placement of his feet, the tiny shift of weight as he maintained perfect composure. The mansion behind them gleamed in the lantern light, windows reflecting the soft illumination and intricate patterns that added a cinematic depth to the scene, emphasizing the contrast between the authority and wealth contained within and the silent, steadfast courage of the child standing before it. Jun-soo's expression softened incrementally, almost imperceptibly, as he allowed himself to consider the patience, intelligence, and thoughtfulness required to maintain such unwavering poise, and in that instant, he realized that this single act of quiet bravery had shifted something fundamental in the space between power and innocence. Mai watched the subtle changes in the boss, noting the flicker of curiosity, the brief shadow of a smile that touched his lips, the slight easing of tension in his shoulders, and she felt a swell of quiet pride for Ethan, understanding that the boy had done something extraordinary without uttering a single word, simply through presence, thoughtfulness, and unspoken communication. The evening air carried the mingled scents of jasmine, polished stone, and the faint perfume of freshly trimmed hedges, creating an ambience that heightened the significance of the moment. The soft rustle of leaves punctuating the stillness and adding a gentle rhythm to the suspended energy in the courtyard. Ethan's eyes remained fixed on Han Jun-soo, conveying respect, patience, and understanding, while the boss's gaze gradually shifted from assessment to reflection, each second allowing the weight of the boy's determination and calm to resonate more deeply. The note, simple in appearance yet potent in implication, seemed to glow in the soft light, a tangible representation of courage and thoughtfulness. And as Han Jun-soo finally bent slightly to pick it up, he allowed himself a private moment of consideration, reading the careful words and absorbing the intent behind them. The contrast between the immense mansion, The authority it represented and the small, deliberate act of the child created a tension that was both compelling and profound, a quiet narrative of respect, patience, and the extraordinary impact of thoughtful action. Maya's hand brushed gently against Ethan's shoulder, not to guide or direct him, but to provide silent reassurance. And in that small gesture, the balance of power, understanding, and quiet admiration seemed to solidify. Han Jun-soo straightened slowly, the note in his hand, and for the first time in the evening, he allowed himself a long, contemplative exhale, a subtle acknowledgement that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most profound weight, that patience, courage, and silent communication can leave an indelible impression even on those who are accustomed to control, precision, and command, and that tonight. A quiet act of thoughtfulness had begun to alter the very atmosphere of the estate itself. Han Jun-soo straightened fully, the note clutched lightly in his hand as his dark eyes met Ethan's for the first time with a depth that carried genuine acknowledgement and a hint of admiration. The Korean Mafia boss took a slow step forward onto the marble driveway, each polished shoe echoing softly against the stones, and the contrast between his commanding presence and the boy's small, unwavering form created a tension that was both magnetic and quiet. The lanterns along the pathway cast gentle pools of light, illuminating the meticulous details of the estate, the manicured gardens, and the polished stone, while highlighting the extraordinary patience and composure of Ethan, who stood as if time itself had granted him space to be entirely himself. Maya's gaze softened as she observed the subtle interaction, noting the faint rise of a smile at the corner of Jun-soo's lips, the easing of tension around his shoulders, and the way his posture had shifted ever so slightly to convey recognition without words. Ethan's eyes remained steady, conveying understanding, respect, and calm confidence, a silent dialogue that needed no explanation, only presence, patience, and intentionality. The evening air carried the mingled scents of jasmine, polished stone, and faintly blooming flowers, a sensory backdrop that amplified the intimacy and weight of the moment, making every second feel deliberate, significant, and resonant. Han Jun-soo exhaled slowly, a gesture deliberate and almost meditative, his dark gaze tracing every detail of the boy's posture, the precise way he had left the note, the subtle courage and thoughtfulness imbued in every movement, and the depth of patience that could influence even a man accustomed to control and authority. The mansion windows reflected the ambient glow of lanterns and fading sunlight, casting a warm hue across the courtyard and accentuating the visual contrast between power, wealth, and the quiet fortitude of a small child who had acted with dignity and intention. Maya's hand hovered close to Ethan, a subtle reassurance, her presence grounding the moment without intruding on the unspoken exchange that had formed between the boy and the boss. The note, simple yet profound, remained a physical representation of thoughtfulness, courage, and the unspoken bridge between two worlds, one of disciplined power and authority, the other of innocence, patience, and quiet resolve. Han Jun-soo's eyes softened further, a flicker of something almost imperceptible, curiosity, respect, and perhaps a dawning understanding of the lessons that patience, courage, and silent action could convey. The wind moved gently through the hedges, rustling leaves softly as if acknowledging the quiet magnitude of the moment, the subtle interplay between light, shadow, and presence capturing the essence of the scene. Ethan remained poised, composed, and immovable, every inch of his small form radiating calm confidence, and Han Jun-soo felt a rare, profound recognition, understanding that the impact of a simple, patient gesture could reach deeper than words, commands, or authority, leaving an impression that would resonate long after the evening had passed and the stars had risen fully into the night sky. Han Jun-soo took another measured step forward, the polished marble under his feet reflecting the soft glow of lanterns and the first hints of stars emerging in the night sky, and his gaze remained locked on Ethan, whose small frame radiated calm resolve and unwavering patience. The Korean Mafia boss allowed himself a long, deliberate pause, letting the weight of the boy's silent determination settle fully in the space between them. And for the first time, he felt the subtle stirrings of admiration, respect, and a rare curiosity that pulled at the edges of his carefully maintained composure. Mai shifted slightly, her presence close and grounding, offering silent reassurance while giving Ethan the space to maintain his stance, her dark eyes reflecting the ambient light as she witnessed the quiet power of observation, awareness, and courage in the boy before them. The note on the ground lay folded but potent, its simplicity belying the thoughtfulness, patience, and intentionality embedded within it. And Han Jun-soo bent slightly, lifting it to read the words carefully, feeling the deliberate nature of every stroke and the purity of the message conveyed without a single sound or gesture beyond placement. The mansion behind them glimmered with a soft reflection from the lanterns, each window capturing the fading light and casting warm hues across the driveway and gardens, while the shadows of the wrought iron gate stretched across the stones, framing the tableau with cinematic precision, accentuating the contrast between authority, wealth, and the quiet strength embodied by the small boy standing before the boss. Ethan's eyes remained steady, meeting Han Jun-soo's gaze with unflinching composure, communicating awareness, thoughtfulness, and respect through presence alone, a silent conversation that carried more weight than any words could, and the subtle rise of a corner of the boss's mouth hinted at a softening of his expression, a flicker of emotion reserved for those rare moments when control and power are met with pure, unadorned integrity. The evening air was crisp and carried the scent of polished stone, jasmine, and freshly trimmed hedges, and each gentle rustle of the leaves seemed to underscore the significance of the interaction, the subtle cadence of nature echoing the quiet heartbeat of the moment. Han Jun-soo exhaled slowly, a deliberate act of reflection, and stepped closer, his posture still commanding but softened by consideration, as he measured the weight of the boy's patience, composure, and quiet determination. Mai felt a swell of pride, observing the unspoken dialogue forming, the invisible bridge of respect, understanding, and recognition being built between a child and a man who had long relied on authority and control to define his world. The light from the lanterns caught the edges of Ethan's small figure and the contours of Han Jun-soo's face, creating a visual contrast that amplified the emotional resonance of the moment, while the distant sounds of the city blended softly into the night, leaving only the driveway, the gate, and the silent, deliberate presence of courage and awareness between them. As the boss extended a subtle nod and a faint, almost imperceptible smile, Mai knew that Ethan's simple, patient, and thoughtful actions had begun to bridge the distance between innocence and authority, teaching a lesson of quiet power, patience, and the profound influence of small, deliberate gestures that could shift even the heart of a man accustomed to command, control, and unwavering order, leaving an imprint that would endure well beyond the night. The courtyard had settled into a quiet, reflective stillness, the lanterns casting soft, warm pools of light across the polished marble, highlighting the subtle movement of Ethan's small figure and the poised presence of Mai nearby. Han Jun-soo remained by the gate, his dark eyes thoughtful and attentive, the faint glow of the evening sky reflecting off the polished surfaces around him as he considered the significance of the boy's silent endurance and deliberate actions. The note, carefully placed and untouched by anyone else, lay as a testament to the patient courage and awareness that Ethan had demonstrated, and the subtle gravity of its presence seemed to echo through the expansive driveway and the surrounding gardens. Mai exhaled slowly, her chest rising and falling in measured rhythm, sensing the quiet shift in energy, the moment where patience, intention, and integrity began to resonate in ways that transcended the usual boundaries of authority and wealth. Ethan's gaze remained steady, unwavering, conveying understanding and quiet confidence, a silent conversation that carried the weight of thoughtfulness and respect without a single word being spoken. The soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze added a gentle cadence to the moment, mingling with the faint scent of jasmine and trimmed hedges, and the stillness was punctuated only by the subtle sound of distant city life beyond the estate, a reminder of the world outside that seemed momentarily suspended in deference to the quiet courage unfolding in the courtyard. Han Jun-soo's posture softened just slightly, the rigid lines of authority relaxing imperceptibly as he allowed the full measure of the boy's patience and intention to register within him, and a fleeting expression of admiration flickered across his features, subtle but undeniable. Maya's presence provided a grounding force, her dark eyes attentive and calm, offering silent support while allowing Ethan to maintain the agency of the moment, a delicate balance that accentuated the quiet power and thoughtfulness emanating from the small figure before the gate. The note in the marble driveway seemed to capture the soft glow of the lanterns, its simple, deliberate existence symbolizing courage, patience, and the extraordinary effect of thoughtful action. And Han Jun-soo's gaze lingered on it, absorbing the magnitude of such a silent, deliberate gesture from someone so young and unassuming. The mansion windows glimmered in the soft evening light, reflecting both the opulence within and the quiet, steadfast presence outside, framing the contrast between authority and humility, grandeur and innocence, and power and silent resilience. Ethan remained composed, his small hands folded neatly in front of him, every movement deliberate, and Han Jun-soo felt a rare, unspoken understanding emerge, a recognition that quiet determination and thoughtful courage could resonate far beyond words, commands, or expectations, leaving an impression that would linger long after the night had fully settled over the estate. The gentle evening wind shifted through the hedges, rustling leaves softly as if acknowledging the gravity of the interaction, while the subtle interplay of light, shadow, and presence captured the depth of this moment, the unspoken dialogue of patience, integrity, and quiet strength echoing in the hearts of all who stood there. Maya's chest rose and fell slowly, pride and awe mingling in her gaze as she observed the transformation beginning to take hold in Han Jun-soo, a man whose understanding and recognition of courage, thoughtfulness, and silent power were being reshaped by the quiet, deliberate actions of a single, steadfast child. The courtyard had grown quiet under the deepening night sky, the soft light from lanterns casting long, gentle shadows across the polished marble, and the air carried the mingled scent of jasmine, trimmed hedges, and the faint warmth of the day lingering in the stone. Ethan stood still, small, and composed, his posture unwavering, eyes reflecting the soft glow of the evening and the quiet satisfaction of a task completed with intention and patience. Maya remained just behind him, her presence calm and reassuring, a silent acknowledgement of the boy's courage and thoughtfulness, understanding fully the significance of what had unfolded over the past hours. Han Jun-soo, standing a few paces from the gate, held the note delicately in his hand, and his dark eyes traced every subtle detail of Ethan's demeanor, the calmness, the precision, and the deliberate care with which he had acted. The mansion behind them shimmered softly, windows reflecting the lantern light and the first stars in the sky, creating a backdrop of refined elegance that contrasted with the simplicity and strength of the small boy before the gate. A gentle breeze moved through the gardens, rustling leaves and carrying a soft, comforting scent, and the quiet sound added rhythm to the moment, highlighting the significance of patience, awareness, and the silent communication that had passed between the child and the boss. Han Jun-soo's posture softened further, shoulders easing, a subtle acknowledgement in the tilt of his head and the slight relaxation of his stance, as he allowed the weight of the boy's courage and thoughtfulness to resonate fully within him. Ethan's gaze remained steady, reflecting focus, composure, and an unspoken confidence that the boss could not ignore, a quiet strength that carried its own authority without demand or assertion. Maya's dark eyes glimmered faintly in the evening light as she observed the silent interaction, sensing the profound impact of the child's patience and deliberate action on a man accustomed to control, precision, and unwavering authority. The note, simple and unobtrusive, lay as a symbol of intention and care, representing the kind of thoughtful action that could shift perception, influence understanding, and create a bridge between two worlds, one defined by immense power and the other by quiet resilience. Han Jun-soo exhaled slowly, a measured, contemplative breath, and allowed a rare, genuine flicker of a smile to touch his features, an acknowledgement of understanding, respect, and the subtle lesson imparted by the boy's patience. The marble underfoot reflected the soft lantern glow. The intricate patterns of the wrought iron gate added depth to the scene, and the courtyard itself seemed to hold its breath, bearing witness to the delicate and profound exchange that had occurred without a single word being spoken. Ethan shifted slightly, a micro-movement of acknowledgement, and Han Jun-soo's eyes softened, registering fully the quiet power of patience, thoughtfulness, and silent strength. The night air, scented lightly with jasmine and trimmed hedges, filled with the gentle hum of distant life beyond the estate, carried a sense of closure, of understanding, and of a profound recognition that even the smallest, quietest actions could leave a lasting impression on hearts accustomed to authority and control. Maya's hand brushed subtly against Ethan's shoulder, a gentle reinforcement of trust and reassurance, and together, the three figures, the boy, the woman, and the boss, stood in the softly lit courtyard, the quiet weight of courage, patience, and thoughtful presence settling like a warm, enduring light that promised to resonate long after the evening had fully embraced the night.